Unbreakable, they alive, damn it, it's a miracle. Unbreakable, they alive, damn it, with females on strong as hell. Unbreakable, they alive, damn it, it's a miracle. Unbreakable, they alive, damn it, with
Weapon.
on strong as hell.
I tell you what, right? That Ganon is a fucking prick. I do not mind telling you, right? Absolute chuffing bastard. And I promised I wouldn't swear today. I promised my mum. And it's a good job I didn't mean it, because otherwise I'd feel really bad right now. But I've had it up to here with him. Oh yeah, it's not enough that he was a swirly pig in Breath of the Wild. He's back for more. In Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, it's a video game I played. You're looking at some video game footage of it now. I hope you enjoy it. I beat the game. I enjoyed it very much, don't worry about that. But I beat the game, so I put it on hard mode and then went back to get some footage. But I don't think for these particular characters who I played with a lot, because they're some of my favourites, I probably should have cranked up to very hard or something. They're going through them like butter. I didn't want to show off too many characters because of, you know, spoilers and all of that if you haven't played it yet. But it's got a lot of characters, drawing of course from Breath of the Wild and not across the entire Zelda series as the original Hyrule Warriors did. Now, of course, that's been a very interesting decision. Ordinarily, a sequel to a Warriors game will be essentially the same thing and it'll have a lot of the same characters. Well, it will usually have all of the original characters from the first game, plus some new ones, and, you know, extra gubbins and stuff. But this one is a prequel, sort of, to Breath of the Wild, to that Legend of Zelda game that came out on the Switch, and some people really liked. And in fairness, I liked it as well. As I've said many times before, I actually do like the game, but it had some issues, which are not in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, but I will not say Age of Calamity is better than Breath of the Wild. Oh, don't get me wrong. I believe that. But I've dragged Breath of the Wild many, many times over the years, so let's do it only moderately now. But in all perfectly frank and non-trolling honesty, I did have more fun with Age of Calamity than I did with Breath of the Wild. And if you know my criticisms of Breath of the Wild, you'll know that the reasons for that are fairly obvious. I mean, well, first of all, I love Warriors games. The Dynasty and Samurai Warriors, the original IP that Omega Force churns out, they've really slacked on that over the years, but once they get their hands on someone else's intellectual property, they start getting imaginative again. As well as that, of course, there is no having to climb the sides of rock faces, where it will inevitably rain and make you slip down and you will yell, "What's wrong with you, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild? Why would you do this to me, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild? I just want to climb up there, Breath of the Wild, to do whatever it is you do up there." It's been years since you can burn an animal to get cooked meat. I remember that. And of course, there's the biggie, the lack of weapon durability in Age of Calamity. The fact that swords would break constantly in Breath of the Wild was my biggest bugbear with it. And with a hack and slash, you do not want that. So you've got no choice. The game has no choice but to let you keep hitting things with a tree branch. The game manages to find a way to get pretty much everything from Breath of the Wild into a Warriors-style package. All of the crafting materials and ingredients are used in various places throughout the game. They can be used to unlock upgrades for each individual character. You can use various ingredients to cook meals before you go into a level, which will give you various stat boosts, like increased attack or an increased drop rate for various materials from monsters. Link, as a playable character, has access to pretty much every weapon he had in Breath of the Wild. Every type of sword, every type of seized weapon from moblins and bokoblins. Is it bokoblin? Bokoblin? I've always said bokoblin. I don't know. Anyway, Link can also unlock all of his costumes from the original game as well. Now, Justin says that, well, they're just reusing all of the assets from Breath of the Wild. Now, may or may not be true, but in any case, I am actually fairly forgiving of asset recycling if it's been recycled, repurposed in some sort of interesting way, if it's not just some straight-up asset flip replication of something somebody else did. Or usually in Omega Force's case with some of their other titles, they do a straight up replication of something they themselves already did. I really like what they've done with a lot of these characters, both the ones that were in Breath of the Wild and the original ones they've included. Every single one has an incredibly unique moveset. A lot of other Warriors games have characters that fight in similar ways. I mean, the Dynasty Warriors, Samurai Warriors series will use cloned movesets if they can get away with it. I still remember what Dynasty Warriors 9 did to Zhong He. Hyrule Warriors is one of the more varied games, and Age of Calamity continues that, with not just unique movesets, but unique abilities as well. If you look at Link, all of the different weapons he has a different moveset and a different unique special attack, such as if you use two-handed weapons, Link can pull off one special devastating move, which he can append to any one of his combo attacks, and it will take some health off of him. But if you press just the regular strong attack, what Link will do is he'll eat a snack and get whatever health he willingly lost back. Mipha, one of my favourite characters, can create little whirlpools of water on the ground, which she can then teleport to and shoot up in the air and perform her really excellent air combo. You've got Daruk, I think that's his name, who can create big magma rocks on the ground and explode them. That's something Zelda can do as well. She creates these runes on the ground like ice blocks or bombs, and she can trigger those to blow up at any time. Impa can create clones of herself by casting seals, symbols on enemies, and then absorbing them to create duplicates of herself. And what I love about Age of Calamity is not just how every character feels different, but unlike a lot of Warriors games, it actually feels like these characters have different play styles. Again, still within that hack and slash structure, but Mipha plays very differently from Impa. The way you engage with enemies, the way you time and schedule your attacks to get the most out of them. It's different. Every character has at least a little bit of a learning curve to them. And admittedly, at times Age of Calamity does a bad job of explaining what each character can do and what other systems in the game can do. So getting to grips with a new character or a new system at first can be a little bit frustrating, but as soon as you get the hang of it, every character, I think, is really fun to use. I didn't actually have much of a main character, well, not until one of the really late unlockables. I'll leave it to you to guess which one it is. But I mean, there's actually 3 characters in this game that could very easily be guessed at as my favourite, but it's the one with the beam. The original Hyrule Warriors was very imaginative in this regard, finding some way to take so many non-player characters from Zelda, including non-combat characters like the Bug Princess and what have you, and finding ways to give them some sort of hack and slash moveset that really worked for them. And Age of Calamity works overtime with that, because it's got only one game to draw from other than an entire series. It takes some really unexpected characters and turns them into warriors with incredibly imaginative movesets. As well as that, each character has access to the Sheikah Slate rune abilities, the stuff from Breath of the Wild, basically summoning bombs, putting enemies into stasis, summoning ice blocks, all of the stuff from Breath of the Wild. And in that regard, every character tends to have some sort of unique way of manifesting those abilities. Some of them, do the same thing, but throwing bombs as Link is very different from Zelda summoning a sort of guardian tank that's showering bombs everywhere. So they really went overboard in taking these characters and giving them so many abilities and so many things to unlock and discover to sort of make up for the fact that it's a reduced cast compared to the first game. And honestly, I think it worked out incredibly well for this game. I do think that despite not feeling as special and novel as the first Hyrule Warriors, this is definitely the better game. It also features a number of gameplay improvements over Hyrule Warriors. For example, dealing with bigger enemies, dealing with just the non-peon enemies, was a little bit restrictive in the original Hyrule Warriors. Basically, every major enough enemy type has a weakness gauge, which they will expose after performing certain attacks. And then when that gauge is above their head, you hammer that enemy with as many attacks as you can before it runs out to reduce it to 0. Once it's reduced to 0, you perform a big attack, and that, in the original Hyrule Warriors, was almost the only thing that would do significant damage to anything that wasn't some chump. Blessedly, Age of Calamity gives you a lot more tools to play with, so you don't feel like most of your moveset is useless the moment you start fighting a Moblin. As well as exposing their weakness gauges, you can time a dodge perfectly to initiate a flurry attack, which will take off often half of the entire weakness gauge. They will also perform certain attacks that you can counter with your abilities, your specifically, your bombs and your ice blocks and everything. A symbol pertaining to a particular one of those will appear above the enemy's head, and then once you hit them with it, or if you hit them with it, I sometimes miss the ice blocks, you will again trigger a weakness gauge. I'm sure it's called something else now. You also have access to rods, which can summon ice spells, fire spells, and lightning spells, which will also stop an enemy in their tracks unless they're elementally tied. You don't want to hit a lightning moblin with a lightning attack. And each enemy's big special attack, the Big Muso style attack, will also deal a fair bit of damage and open that gauge as well. So you've got a lot of tools this time. Fighting those enemies feel less like very slowly, very drearily chopping at a tree. I like the whole sprawling world map between stages. It's a little bit overwhelming, especially when it fills with an absurd amount of symbols, but there is luckily a sort of navigational menu as well, so you can find stages and sort them by the story chapters, or the optional side missions, or the various challenges that just require you to throw materials at something to unlock hearts or new combos or recipes. And overall it tells an interesting story about Hyrule before the events of Breath of the Wild, with the waking up of Calamity Ganon and everything involved in that. I mean, it's not brilliantly written or performed really, it's fine, but there's some interesting bits in there. There's some fun interactions with characters that might not otherwise have done so. And when it starts to get a bit weird later, at first I was really annoyed by it because it felt like a bit of a cop-out, but it grew on me. They tried to do something unique, and even though I don't think it was wonderfully done, it's fine. And that's Age of Calamity. I got a lot out of it. I really enjoyed it. I still think the original Hyrule Warriors, especially with the characters drawing from the series, I think it's a more special game, but on a mechanical level, just as far as a game and a full package goes, Age of Calamity is the business. It's better by far than the original Hyrule Warriors in that regard. I think anyone who enjoyed the original Hyrule Warriors will also get a lot out of this one. I'm not quite sure how much crossover there will be between people who explicitly liked Breath of the Wild and this, especially if they're not fond of Warriors games to begin with, but you never know. But what's important is that I liked it, because my opinion is the best one.
Unbreakable, they alive, damn it, it's a miracle.